the particular school. Schools are required to publish this information. Unfortunately, though, it's not all in the same place. So you may have to look at it. The net cost, that's the difference between the total college costs, the cost of attendance, minus grants and scholarships. So minus all of the good stuff. Definitely want to get as much as that as possible. The EFC, you're probably familiar with that already. The expected family contribution, that is a misnomer. We know that, but basically that is the result of the FAFSA data. So your FAFSA data goes into a calculation that's determined by law and spits out an EFC. What that is meant to measure is the family's financial strength based on the data on the FAFSA, the income and assets. And that is how what schools will use to begin the awarding process. Demonstrated need is just the difference between the cost of attendance and the EFC. The unmet need, sometimes called the gap, is the difference between the full demonstrated need, meaning the total cost, and the student's need-based financial aid package. So Pell Grant, supplemental grant, work study, that kind of thing. What you would have gotten that we're going to be talking about tonight is a financial aid award letter or a financial aid offer. The trend now is going away from an award letter and calling it an offer. Part of that is because student loans can be part of that offer, and the term award and student loans is kind of weird to put together. So when you get offers from schools, they may be named financial aid award letter, it may be financial aid offer. They're both the same things. The package is everything that you are offered, where it's grant aid, need-based aid, non-need-based aid, scholarships, loans, all of it. Oops, I am so sorry. The thing that you have to know when you're looking at your financial aid offer so that you can compare them adequately is there is no standard format. There again, that can be really crazy making because we all want to know what's the bottom line. What am I going to have to pay here? And that's the important thing. The amount that you're offered is not the important thing. The amount you have to pay out of your pocket or make up from other sources, that's the important thing. There again, colleges may use differing costs of attendance. Cost of attendance can fluctuate from student to student based on the student's situation and working with the financial aid office. For example, if a student has some costs associated with a disability, then they may have some cost to put in their cost of attendance that another student might not have. Colleges may award it's called campus-based aid, which is basically a limited amount of money that the federal government gives to financial aid offices for them to spend based on the criteria that they set. Unfortunately, there is never enough of that money to go around to students who might be eligible. So there is a gap there. This says FSEOG, that's Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. You may see that on your award notification. This says Perkins Loan. Perkins Loan does not exist anymore, but I wanted people to be aware that you may still hear that and that you may see it on old award letters, say for an older sibling or that kind of thing. Work study. is also a campus-based fund, but it may be awarded differently from campus to campus. So you could, in fact, have an award letter that has SEOG and or work study, and another one from another school with the exact same EFC and not have those things, or have them in differing amounts. Kind of crazy making. Before accepting any of the aid, you need to know the differences between the type of aid being offered. It's really easy, especially in this electronic age, to blindly click buttons. Any loans that you are offered as a student, sometimes they are in the main body of the financial aid offer with the grants and that kind of thing. Sometimes they are separate. If they are in the main body and you're just clicking the buttons, you may accept a loan where you don't want to. Now, the saving grace in that, or there are additional steps if you want to get the loan, but you need to be aware of that before you start clicking the buttons. Comparing college financial aid award letters is based on the out-of-pocket costs. I've said that before, but it bears repeating, not the net cost or the amount of aid being offered. So you may be offered $20,000 at one school and $10,000 at another school, but the school that offered you $10,000 may end up being cheaper. So it's not necessarily what you're getting, it's what you're paying. The offer that you get is only for 1 year. So it's for the academic year for which you applied. So in this case, coming up will be 21-22. You do have to fill out the FAFSA every year. Yeah, that fun form. It is changing, by the way. So in a couple of years, it's going to be different, but you will have to do that every year. So the offer can change from year to year. There again, you want to make sure you are doing things on time and by deadlines, because you may be offered SEOG or work study 1 year because you met a deadline, the next year not meet that deadline and not have those funds anymore. Rule of thumb, if the difference in out-of-pocket costs is about less than about $1,000, the difference isn't significant enough to affect the college choice. So if it really comes down to costs and you're within that $1,000 range, I wouldn't let that $1,000 be the deciding factor, because give or take $1,000, there are more important things to make that determination. But if the difference is greater, especially if it's more than $5,000, you really should consider that, because that is a lot. And remember, we're looking at 1 year. So if you're looking at 4 years, that could be a 20 grand shortfall. That could be a considerable amount. The types of aid that you might see on your award letter. The Pell Grant, that is a federal grant from the federal government based on need. That need goes back to what you put on your FAFSA and that federal calculation built in by law that determines whether or not a student will get that federal Pell Grant. There are state grants. We're very lucky here in the state of Oregon that we have the Oregon Opportunity Grant. It is based on need also, but it is limited. So some students may have the need and not get it because they have filled out their FAFSA late. There again, you don't want to do that. The amount you get from a community college is going to be less than the amount that you get at a four-year school. So if you get different award letters from the different school, yes, that can vary. We touched on FSEOG, SEOG, limited money school gets, it is based on need. Work study for a student, that's kind of transparent, and then it's a job. You work the job, you get a paycheck, the paycheck goes to you, and you spend that on educational expenses. Um, the nice thing about that is the money to pay you actually comes from the federal government. So you are a really attractive employee for the schools. The downside of that is you can only earn what you are offered. So if you're offered $3,000 in the school year, that's all you can earn. Once you've earned that, you're done unless the department that you're working in offers to pay you out of their budget. Institutional aid, that could be grants or scholarships that the college awards you, like at U of O. It could be Apex, Summit, Pathway, it could be any of those. Schools have their own money. How they award that money is up to them. And yes, there again, you could get more money from one school than another. And that's mostly either because their criteria is different or maybe when you applied. Private donor, those are the private scholarships that students apply for through the OSAC scholarship application. Any of the ones that you find through Navient or that I send you in email or FastWeb, all of those are from private individuals or foundations or families. I always say whoever gives the money sets the rules. There again, the foundations, the private individuals, they will set the rules. Money that has to be paid back. And if you're watching the news and reading articles, student loan is a hot topic now. Federal direct subsidized loan, you may hear that phrase. You may hear the phrase Stafford. They are the same thing. The eligibility for subsidized is based on need, which there again is the cost of attendance minus the EFC. Students are not charged interest on the subsidized during certain periods. So typically when they're enrolled at least half time. So if a student is enrolled up until say June, takes the summer off and then starts again in fall, the payments aren't going to start during the summer because it's continuous enrollment. You take a year off or more than 6 months off, even if you have not earned a degree, you will go into repayment. The interest rate will fluctuate. It's actually gone down considerably since last year. So it's at a pretty good interest rate, 2.75. Unsubsidized. It's not need-based, but it's significantly more expensive. So what that means is as soon as that money is applied to your student account to pay your bill, interest is going to start accruing. You can pay that interest while you're in school or during summer. That would be great if you did. You're not required to. But what will happen is when you enter repayment for your loans, 6 months after you drop below half time, then any interest that accrued or was added on while you're in school will then be added on to the amount you actually borrowed. So for example, if you borrow $2,000 and while you're in school, you don't pay any of the interest and $1,000 worth of interest accrues. When you enter repayment, then that $1,000 of interest is going to be added to the $2,000 you borrowed. So then you're paying interest on interest. That can get very expensive very fast. And that's why I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. You really need to know what you are being offered and make sure you're not randomly clicking buttons saying, okay, 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 because in the electronic age, you are not putting pen to paper and it's very, very easy to do. Federal Direct Plus loan, those are loans made to parents for their students' education. They are based on credit. So if a parent doesn't have great credit, they can get a cosigner. Whether or not it's a better rate than what you could get, say, on a home equity line of credit or a personal loan is really going to depend on the family's financial situation. So that's I've got to look and look at the pros and cons of that. Some colleges actually have their own money that they lend to students, and they set the eligibility criteria and the terms meaning interest rate, repayment period, that kind of thing. Private loans, there are private educational loans. There again, buyer beware. They will say they're for school. They are, absolutely. There's no argument there, but they are not the federally subsidized loan money. There's not federal money behind it. There's no federal law behind it. There's no federal criteria keeping the interest rate low. So the private lenders can charge you a market rate, and they can set rules that are a little bit different or a lot different from the federal loans. And lenders can vary, just like when we go get a loan for anything else, a personal loan, a car loan, a home mortgage, our loan terms may vary. It's the same thing with a private loan. So you need to be very, very careful with that. Now, a word about the debate with federal student loans. It's a double-edged sword. I am not going to, in this case, sit here and tell you that they are the worst thing in the world, because they do not have to be. I am just saying, be careful. What the advantage of one of these loans can do is that $1,000 difference, maybe. Okay, I can go to my dream school if I just take out $1,000 worth of loan. It can really help students establish credit, because yes, it will go on your credit report. It will affect your credit score. So if you manage it responsibly, it will be a positive on your credit report. On the other hand, if you do not manage it responsibly, it can really hurt you, and it takes a very long time for your credit score to increase. So it really depends on how you manage your money. The amount of debt that you can rack up, there again, it's hard to know how much debt that you're going to be able to handle when you graduate, because we really don't have a crystal ball. And unfortunately, there are some industries where a student immediately starts earning more than others. For example, my best friend from college, we had the same major, we had the same GPA, we did all the same things. Right out of college, she started in banking. I started in education. You can probably surmise that a banker makes more than an educator. We graduated with the same amount of loan debt. Mine was harder to pay because I earned less, but I was still held to that even though I earned less. There are income repayment plans. That's the nice thing about the federal loans, is they're a little bit more lenient than, say, with our home loan or our car loans or a personal loan, in that they will allow you to pay based on your income. But there again, going back to my example, if I had done that, yeah, my payment would have been less than my friends who was making 2-3 times more than I did, but it would have taken me longer to pay my loan off. And so I would have had more interest. Therefore, I would have paid more back than she did. So it can kind of be unfair that way. So there again, that's another reason to really think hard about how much money you're borrowing and what type before you click those buttons. Okay, I know this might be hard to see, but this is an example of an award letter. This happens to be from Willamette University. It is one of the good ones in that it has the amounts laid out very, very clearly. But as you will see on this one, the loans are lumped in at with the other funds. So it's really easy to look at this and say, oh, great, I was awarded $35,800. Fabulous. But if looking at it, subtracting that loan, it's only about 33,000. It's still a great package, but still you have to really look at that. This one, breaking down the cost of attendance. If you notice here, they've got the direct costs separate. What the direct costs is anything you bill to the college. So it's going to be tuition and fees, right? Got to pay that. It could be room and board if you live on campus. So those are the costs that must be paid first. All of the funding is going to go to the school. It's going to go to the business office, bursar, whatever they call it. That will vary from school to school. And you know the school's going to get their money first, right? So that's important to know. All right, how much am I paying to the school? So how much am I going to owe the school just for my direct cost? And then they break down the housing. Well, if you haven't made those direct costs, you're still going to have to pay for housing. Budget, they budget $990 for books and supplies. There again, that's an estimate. Financial aid offices are really good at estimating these things. They do it every year. There's actual times where they do the research, but that can vary on a lot of things. It could vary from term to term. It can vary from where you shop. It can vary with the kind of classes that you take. So just note that is an estimate. And then this one breaks out the student's work study program. So this student got work study in the amount of $2,500. So that was his to earn over the course of the year, and that would go directly to him in the form of a paycheck. However, because it goes to him, that doesn't necessarily mean he can spend it on what he wants. If you still owe the college or university money for tuition and fees, that's where it needs to go. Because the funny thing is if you don't pay your bill, you're not allowed to register for a next term. You know, it just works that way. But if that's covered, it may go towards dorms, it could go towards books. So it is the student's money, but to manage to pay for the educational expenses. This one a little bit different. I like this one in that the cost of attendance is spelled out right up front. You can see it. That you don't have to look at, well, we've got tuition here and room and board here. You don't have to look at the different lines. So this one is pretty easy to read. So the cost of attendance at this school is $55,000. Sounds really expensive. Is it? Yeah, but there again, depending on what a student might get, it may end up being cheaper than, say, one of our state institutions. Has the awards broken down. President's Scholarship, that's an institutional fund. Pell Grant, that SEOG that we talked about. In this case, the state gave some money. Work study, and then here we get to the loans. As I said, Perkins doesn't exist anymore, but you may see them in things that you read because it was a big program at one time and it was a loan program. So if the student accepted all of the aid that they're offered, including the loans, they're still going to have a gap between that 55,000 and that 34,000. If they don't want the loans, the 55 minus the 20,000, the Pell Grant, the Opportunity Grant, and the state grant, that difference would be the amount that the family would have to pay to cover all expenses. So the 39,000 tuition and fees is pretty much covered by the free money, but you got to pay for the other stuff. And there again, books and supplies, personal and miscellaneous, those are estimates. Students have total control over those by how they buy books or share books, or sometimes professors put them on reserve in the library. Oftentimes you can rent them. That's a relatively new thing to me. I didn't know that. You can rent them. Used bookstores, that kind of thing. Sometimes you're stuck buying an expensive book. You do need to look at the edition of the book, because the editions change, and you don't want to go to a used bookstore, buy the first edition when your professor is using the third edition and you don't have the right book. So, you do have control over that. Personal expenses you have control over. I think a lot of people have heard me tell my story. When I started college, my family ceased to give me fun gifts. For holidays, I always got shampoo and personal care items and socks, and it was like, yeah, this is really great. But I got to admit, it came in handy when I was in college. But personal and miscellaneous also can include your fun money, because you do want to go out for pizza with your friends once in a while. When you're really tired and you want to splurge, going to Starbucks once in a while is not a bad thing. You want to have that, so you have to build that into. This gets down to the nitty gritty, and I put the Willamette and then the sample. So as you can see, even though Willamette is more expensive than the sample, their out-of-pocket cost is not a lot different given the aid package from the sample university. And if you notice on the sample university, there's more loans included than at Willamette. And I'm only using Willamette as an example simply because a student gave me their award letter. I'm not doing it for any other reason. So as you see, the out-of-pocket cost, not really far off, could be manageable, but the aid is totally different. And that loan aid is totally different. So when you subtract that loan aid or add it back on to the out of pocket, if you're not going to take loan aid, then it's a totally different ballgame. Totally different. So if a student was looking at this, they'd say, oh, 23,009 versus 27,824. Sample is a little bit cheaper. Oh, but wait, I have to take $8,000 worth of loans. What if I don't take them? What if I don't take 5,000? Then Willamette becomes cheaper. So you really have to do the math. And I did post tonight on my website a worksheet to do this kind of thing. If we were in person, I would have those for you. I could hand them out, but we're not. You can download it. And this is what it looks like. This will help you figure out exactly what you would need to pay out of pocket for your cost. Now, this is an older one. The interest rates are different. The one on my website is the one from this year. But I really encourage you to use this, or one you found on the internet, whatever you want, to know what it's going to cost and whether or not taking out any loan at all is either necessary or advisable. Ways to reduce costs. This isn't really anything to do with reading an award letter. It's just prudent stuff. And I do these presentations all the time, and I'm always talking about this. There again, you buy used books whenever you can. I mean, unless they're tattered and marked up, used books are just as good as the new ones. Rent them, work it out to share with a classmate, get them out of the reserve section of the library. Lots of ways to decrease costs. Use the equipment available to you on campus, like free computers or printers. Ink is expensive. Paper is expensive. If you can use it free to print on campus instead of doing it at home, that's a good deal. There are, in most libraries, printers, and excuse me, sometimes you have to pay, but they might have a reduction in cost if you pay up front and get like a printer card, and you just use that until you use up all your money, and they'll give you a discount rather than charging you like 5 cents a page. If you live off campus, and this is always a hot debate, what is cheaper? But if you live off campus, shop at the lower cost market. I mean, you're going to go to Winco, or you're going to go to Market of Choice. Now, of course we want Market of Choice food. We want to get the organic, we want to get the good stuff. But even if you shop at Winco, you can still eat healthy meals and not pay twice the price. Make your own food instead of eating out. Fast food, I honestly don't know how much it costs, but I'm assuming that cheap fast food is $5 a meal, 5 to 10. If you're doing that every day for at least one meal, add up that cost. Where if you're making your own food, and even if you have to pack food and take it to campus with you, it's going to be a lot cheaper. Don't get expensive cell phone plans, internet or cable or satellite TV packages. I know we get spoiled with this, especially being at home. I know how much I pay for all of that. There is no way as a student I could afford to pay what I pay now. Is it nice to have that kind of thing? Absolutely. It is. But if you're having to pay for it out of your pocket rather than being on a parent's plan, it's going to add up. Netflix, what is it now? 14, 15 bucks. That's pretty cheap compared to 120 for a cable or satellite package. Cell phones, yes, you most likely will need one, but there are cheaper plans. Don't need all the bells and whistles. If you live on campus, or even if you live off, you can get meal plans. Use your meal plan rather than eating out. That's what it's there for. A lot of times you can go down and just grab a quick snack, take it to class with you, rather than walking across saying, oh, there's a Starbucks, I'm going to get a coffee and a pastry. Use your meal plan. And I'm not saying don't ever eat out. There again, you need a break. You need to have some fun. Go out with your buds. Do that fun stuff. But budget it and use the resources that you have. Forgo the car, especially if you have a car payment and insurance. And I will tell you, if you've ever been on the U of O campus, you cannot find parking. It's just not there. Even as a staff member, when I worked there, there was not parking. Sometimes I would have to walk 2 or 3 blocks, not that I didn't need it, just to get to my office. Very, very expensive. And if you're buying a parking pass to park on campus, they're very expensive. If you're get a ticket because your meter ran out, very expensive. Get a boot on your car, even more expensive. The upkeep of a car is expensive. So if you're living on campus, forego the car. Big campuses often will have trams or buses. Walking across campus is usually not that big of a deal. Free bus passes. Our bus system is pretty good. So as nice as it is to have a car, if at all possible, forego it. Families there again, personal care items make great gifts. Laundry detergent. I actually send my niece laundry detergent once in a while. It's kind of our joke between us. She thinks it's funny, but it comes in handy. Take advantage of student discount offers and apps that give you discounts. And there are a lot out there. I know sometimes apps can clutter up your phone and get annoying, but save while you can. The habits that you're getting now in college for budgeting are going to follow you the rest of your life. So might as well start now. Find out if there's a rideshare program. A lot of schools will have them. So say you go to college out of town and you want to go home for the break. There are oftentimes rideshare programs where students will carpool, or a group of students get together and say, okay, we're gonna, on Wednesdays at this time, we're gonna go to the supermarket and do our shopping together and carpool, things like that. Use credit wisely. I can't emphasize that enough. You ever want to do budgeting with me, I'm happy to. Done lots of sessions in budgeting. Please let me help you with budgeting. Kind of my thing. Frequently asked questions. Do you have to accept your loans? No, you do not. They are an offer. You do not have to accept them. On the other hand, if you think that you're going to need them, then go back and do the research and ask the questions so that you are accepting them responsibly. Do you have to accept work study? No, you don't. But if you don't, you could lose it. And you may get in and to school and say, oh, I really do need a job. I want my work study back. It's so limited that it doesn't work that way. So go ahead and accept it. If you don't use it, you don't use it. Or if you don't earn it all because you can't work because of your schedule, or the job that you've been working at doesn't fit into your schedule anymore, that's okay. You just don't want to lose it. And we're going to touch on this more, but can your financial aid offer be adjusted based on a family's financial situation? Maybe. We are in very uncertain times. Many families took a huge hit this past year because of COVID. So if the circumstances has changed in the family, not just because of COVID, but for any reason, say you've had a lot of medical expenses, or income has gone down, or say a grandparent moves in with you and now, parents are having to support them, or there's been a loss of assets or something like that. Financial aid offices have the ability, they're given by federal regulation, the ability to look at families' financial situations and potentially do what's called a professional judgment override. How they will do that will differ from school to school. What they consider to make that a special circumstance and override can vary from school to school, but you won't know unless you ask. Another question that I get asked a lot is, can I just ask the financial aid office for more money even if things haven't changed? Sure, you can. Sure. Private schools are a little bit more flexible there than publics because of the funding structure, but you certainly can. We had a student this year, I'm not breaking any confidence because I'm not going to use a name, but was accepted into a university that is her favorite. She really wants to go there. They didn't offer her quite enough money. She wrote him a letter and said, hey, I really want to go to this school, but this is a make or break thing. And they were able to give her $5,000 more, which is pretty significant. So it does not hurt to ask. Are there limits on the amount of financial aid that you can get? Yeah, there is. There's limits on the amount of student loans you can borrow. They're quite high, but you still can use it all if you're not borrowing wisely. You only get Pell Grant for a certain number of quarters, and after you have amassed so many credits, you may be not eligible for aid at all. The limits are pretty generous. So like 150% of the published program. So say you're going to a 4-year program, that's typically about 180 credits. 150% of that would be about 220. So that's pretty generous. Most students can earn their bachelor's degree within that number of credits. But if you're taking a lot of things and not passing them, but still getting aid for them, or hopping around from school to school to school, that can hurt you. It's not real common, but just know that it's out there. You want to do credits with the purpose and know how many credits are required for your program, because there again, it can vary. Some programs are more than others. If you get a scholarship, an outside scholarship, do you need to tell the financial aid office? Yes, you do. You are obligated to do that. So you would just write them an email, call them, send them a note and say, hey, I got this amount of scholarship. I got it for 1 year, 2 year, whatever. And will they adjust your financial aid package? Yeah, they probably will. Now, they're not going to take away Pell Grant because that's an entitlement, meaning you're eligible based on federal regulations. There it is. Could they adjust the other things? Yeah, they certainly could. Here we go. This is what I was talking about, living in uncertain times. So if you have any question whatsoever about the amount of aid that you've received and whether or not it's going to be sufficient to go to the college of your choice, I would suggest contacting the financial aid office and talking to them about alternatives to see if your situation would warrant a change, or if there's any other funding. Now, there's always private scholarships. If you're not applying for them, please do. I can help you with that. But they may have some funding that they could help you with. And it's worth the time. It's worth the phone call. It's worth the email. Definitely. Additional resources, financial aid office, they will be your best friend. Awesome human beings. The federal website, the studentaid.ed.gov, is really good information. We all think, oh, a federal website, it's going to be hard to understand. It's not. They've got really, really, really good information. FinAid.org. That is an organization. It's not federal, it's private, that old-timey financial aid folks are involved in, and they've got good resources. There are calculators on that site too, where you can go plug everything in and say, okay, what's the out-of-pocket cost gonna be, how, if I pay this much on my loans, how much am I going to borrow, that kind of thing. So they've got a lot of different things. College Board, which I know you're familiar with because we deal with them all the time. They've got some really good resources too. So I would invite you and encourage you to look at the resources on those sites. I mean, there are a lot of worksheets. The one I have, I particularly like, but that's just me. You might find one that works a little bit better for you, that makes more sense to you. or whatever. If for the student loans, I would encourage you to do one of the online loan payment calculators. There are a lot out there. You just plug in the information and it'll tell you, okay, if you pay your payment on this amount, your total loan amount will be X number of dollars and it will take you this long to pay it off. That's a really good thing to do before you accept those loans. So you can see if I borrow that $3,000 and it takes me 10 years to pay it off, how much am I actually paying back? Because remember, we have that interest. So I would invite you and encourage you to do that also. Some of those sites have what's called an amortization schedule, which will actually lay it out for you. Here's the amount you have over 10 years. So the first month of the 10 years, you're going to have this much interest, and then the second month this much interest, and it'll go through the whole thing. If you like numbers like I do, it's kind of exciting to see, but if you hate them, it's good to at least glance at. Just want to give credit where credit is due. In association with some of these fine folks that I know and I've worked with forever, got some of my information from them. We collaborated, put our stuff together. So give them credit. And that's it for my slideshow. I'm going to stop sharing, and you can put questions in the chat, and I'll come back on, or I can stop. Well, I'll stop recording and we can just chat.